Welcome to the Freely Rooted Mama podcast. Where I am their mother, I make the choice. All right, hello, welcome back. Happy Thursday. Today we're going to talk about introducing your baby to foods. So this was a request I got through a DM, which thank you guys for reaching out and DMing me and giving me input on what you want to learn and know more about. It's really helpful and really fun to create content that you guys are actually interested in. So if you have things that you want me to talk about or things you want to learn more about, just DM me on Instagram. It's the best way to find me, or you can email me and I'll either give my opinion on it or anything that I know about it. So yeah, thank you so much for the person that reached out about this. So when it comes to introducing foods to your baby, there's kind of two schools of thought. There's the baby-led feeding and weaning aspect, and then there's purees. If we go way back in time, most people did the baby-led feeding weaning way. We didn't have all these purees on the shelves. We didn't have ways to always puree a bunch of food. You know, if we look at the caveman day, you know, mom may have given a bone of meat with some meat on it to the baby to gnaw on, which has actually some great benefits. Well, you've got a lot of sound effects going on. I've got my co-pilot here with me today. So that's not to say that purees are bad. Here's a couple things on purees, because I'm going to mostly talk about baby-led feeding today, because that's what we did with Isaac. A couple things to know with purees. One is definitely make sure it's organic. A lot of purees are fruits, and many fruits are sprayed with pesticides and filled with glyphosate. So again, you know, remember that they don't have a blood-brain barrier. We want to protect their brain from neurotoxins and chemicals. So make sure it's organic and make sure it's not filled with a bunch of, you know, synthetic ingredients or sugar or unnecessary things. So that's kind of my 2 cents on purees. The other thing is glass is better also, by the way. If a puree can come in glass, it's better than it sitting in plastic. Again, plastic has PFAs, BPAs, things like that, forever chemicals that can go up into their brain because, again, they don't have a blood-brain barrier. So try for glass if you can. Not to make you feel guilty if you're not buying glass. I'm just giving my 2 cents on purees. But for the most part, culturally, we gave babies food. And of course, you want to give it in the appropriate size to where they're not going to choke. But I think purees, A, are a great convenience. B, they are really helpful if you have an overwhelming fear of your child choking, which I will talk on. And 3, it's just marketing. I mean, really, it's great marketing. Parents are going to, you know, sometimes, especially if you don't have access to a lot of great foods near you, you can get, you know, some organic, nice baby foods in glass. It's convenient. It's easier if you're a person that's on the go a lot or you've got multiple kids or things like that. It can be really convenient. So I'm not dissing purees. We used a couple of them ourselves, but I don't think they're necessary is what I'm saying. So one of the reasons that I loved baby-led feeding so much is because it's convenient as to whatever food you're making for your family, you and your partner or your other kids, you give to baby, you just do it in appropriate sizing to where they're not going to choke. That to me is convenient and really fun to get to see them start to, you know, play with different textures and start to try to do hand-eye coordination with the food versus having to sit down and spoon feed them a puree. One of the things about purees is it doesn't really help their jaw development. So that's one of the great things about breastfeeding too, by the way, is that the way that they have to latch and use their jaw muscles to get the breast milk out really helps them develop a stronger bone jaw structure. And you can go follow a bunch of biological dentists. They really talk about this versus, especially if you go to the bottle, most people will feed their baby the bottle with them on their back, and the bottle just has the formula coming out, and the baby doesn't have to do a lot of work in terms with their jaw of getting the milk or the formula out, or even if you're giving them breast milk in a bottle. I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but like when you want to give your baby a bottle, like we've been working with her a little bit on giving her a bottle or just trying to get her to take a bottle so that if I have to go out for a couple hours, like, you know, my husband can feed her. You really want to have them more in this upright position, which, I mean, if you're watching me on YouTube, you can see, but I'm supporting her, but she's more sat up. And then you want to put the bottle at parallel to like the ground, to where you're kind of just sloshing the milk into the nipple, but they're still having to do a lot of work on sucking to get it out versus having their head back and that milk just draining right into their throat. They're not actually having to work, which doesn't really develop that jaw as much. So same goes to purees. As we give them purees, they're not really having to do a lot of work within their mouth muscles to swallow and get that puree. Versus if we start to give them foods where they maybe have to do a little bit more work, where they're maybe chewing or starting to chew with their gums, or even like one of the biological dentists that I love, she talks about just giving them like a big carrot and letting them gnaw on that on the back of like their gum lines, which is really good for their jaw. It's really good for their teeth development. And if we think about the caveman era, again, like you've got like a rib bone or something with some meat on it, if you give it to them so that they can kind of suck on it, and that there's no way that they can choke on it because it's so big, but it just helps them develop those muscles back there. So just a couple things on purees. I think it's totally okay to start it, but just know that you're really going to want to start to introduce foods to your baby at some point. And A, it really helps them with that jaw development, but B, also gets them used to hand-eye coordination. It allows different textures. It allows them to get a variety of different tastes and textures within the food and different spices, and it's good for their microbiome. So there's so many benefits to the baby-led feeding. Now, I know that there's a lot of worry around choking, and here's what I'm going to say. A, like make sure you're CPR certified. We've already had a choking incident with Isaac. We had it a couple months ago. It was super scary. But I felt good knowing that we knew what to do in the choking incidents. We knew the basics of CPR, but we went and redid our CPR certification to fully refresh again on what we need to be doing. But if you have no idea how to even do CPR or what to even do with a choking child, highly recommend it. In fact, if you don't have access to somewhere near you to go learn, there's a great online course that you can do with Shanna Tripp. She's one of the Instagram accounts I've talked about before. I highly recommend you go follow her. She used to be an ER pediatric nurse. And she's got a whole course on choking, actually just medical things that could happen for moms that are at home. Really beneficial. But that being said, yes, we all have a fear of choking, of our kids choking. And as long as we're prepared, we've got to start letting our kids get introduced to food. So that's really why I loved the baby-led feeding. Now for Isaac, we just started off with things like a banana, avocado. Again, remember you're building a microbiome, so you want to do really nutrient-dense foods that you're giving them. We did ribs and things, or like steak, and we cut like a long strip so that he could just suck on that and get all the juices out and all the nutrients. I have a baby-led feeding guide that you can download. It just kind of reviews everything I just said. And then it's got a whole resource page of all the books that we used and bought when we started baby-led feeding. And it's got a lot of great recipe ideas and food ideas on what you can introduce to your kiddo. There's also Pinterest. Pinterest has a lot of great ideas too. So that being said, I just really think that it's important that we start to introduce these foods to our kids. Isaac is a great eater. He's been an amazing eater his entire existence. I would say, especially in regards to other kiddos I see, just in terms of the types of foods that he's willing to eat. He's not very picky because we've introduced so many things to him at a young age. He's really confident with his hands. And then after that, we started introducing him to forks and spoons, and he can eat really well with a fork and a spoon. So there's just so much developmentally that I loved about baby-led feeding that I would highly recommend it to anybody. But again, you got to be confident in your child's ability to eat. And remember, choking is different than coughing. So if your kid is coughing, that's working. They're getting it up and they're out. So yes, we can all start to, be on alert if you hear them coughing, but coughing means that they're getting air in and out and that they're working it out on their own. Choking is a little bit different. So I think too, one of the things when you start baby-led feeding, I remember my mom was so nervous about when Isaac was 6 months old, she came over and we were giving him food and she was just on edge. And I'm like, Mom, you've got to stop looking at Isaac that way, because I don't want him to be fearful of him eating. I want him to be confident in him eating. So you got to wrap up that worried face. And when he coughs, of course you can look and you can say are you okay? And, tone down any anxiety you've got in yourself and, show them that you believe in them as well. But then also be prepared. Be prepared for what happens if there is a choking incident, and be prepared for what happens if you have to give CPR. But choking is pretty uncommon actually with kiddos that have started baby-led feeding, because they've gotten used to that ability to cough things up and things like that. Whereas with purees, yes, purees you can still choke on, but purees are mostly just swallowing. So they're not having to work a lot on those reflexes. Anyways, that's my 2 cents on introducing foods to kiddos. Again, we really started with things like sauerkraut, a lot of meat, just in big chunks so that he could suck the juices out or gnaw on it. We did a lot of I would take like a piece of sourdough bread and I would either spread ghee on it or just smother it in olive oil, and he would suck on that. I remember actually I did a post on Instagram about it, and somebody said something about giving my kid bread. And I was like, well, he can't actually chew the bread. So I took the heel of a loaf, and I was like, first off, the sourdough bread is homemade with my ancient grain flour with no synthetic ingredients, made from scratch and fermented, sourdough. So it's the best bread he could possibly find. But 2, he's not really eating it, but he is sucking all the olive oil or the ghee out, which is such great fat for their brain. So doing a lot of good fat is awesome. Anything that you could, like the steak, I would melt butter on so that as he's, kind of gnawing on the steak, he's getting a lot of good fat through the butter. We did a lot of sweet potato, where I'd chop it into chunks, and then we would melt butter all over it. We did a lot of fruit. So again, he liked banana, blueberries, he's always loved. I'm trying to think of all the other things. That feels like a lifetime ago that we started introducing foods to him, but he loved it. He loved avocado, sauerkraut. We started once we weren't afraid of the long pieces getting stuck in his throat. I know that we did way more, but that's just some ideas to kind of get you started. Again, we got a lot of the ideas from the books that I have in the baby-led feeding guide. So if you want to go get those books, you can. But I hope that's helpful. It's just really my opinion. I'm not a baby eating expert. It's just what we did. But there is a lot to be said about the jaw development piece. So if I could prove one point today, it would be you want to continue that jaw development. We've learned so much in the last 10 years about how important our jaw development is and how much it's actually not developing not developing as much as it could be, because we've come up with these things that allow kids really not to work those muscles anymore. So anyways, hope that's helpful. Again, find me on Instagram. You can also find these episodes on YouTube if you want to watch them, but find me on Instagram, connect with me there. Would love to get to know you, love to know what you want to learn more about, and have a fabulous rest of your week.